Hello, this is 9 to 5, a financial independence podcast where we focus more on the retire early side of FIRE. I'm Josh. I retired, I hate that word, at 48 after 25 years in the corporate world. I'm joined by my co-host Elliot, who is near the end of full-time employment as well. We share our paths to early retirement, challenges that we've faced, and what life looks like on the other side, including struggles and opportunities that life keeps throwing our way. We're an ad-free podcast, but if you would like to support us in any way, we have links in the show notes and video description for books and other products that we use and love. Thanks for tuning in. Let's kick it to the episode. Hey, Elliot, what's up?
Not much, Josh. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. Actually, I guess I'm doing very well because I just heard yesterday that this time of year is considered to be fairly depressing for most of us, I guess. In fact, there's a word for yesterday was the third Monday of January, and they call it Blue Monday because depression rates tend to be at their highest after like post-holiday fun and perhaps getting into some level of debt, and then you're just back at work, not much to look forward to, the weather still sucks, all of those sort of things. And it kind of caught me by surprise. I was like, I can't relate to that. So
Must be nice, Josh. No, I will say I was off for the Martin Luther King holiday yesterday, so it wasn't too blue for me either. I will say it was a very lazy day in our household. Yeah, we kind of just sat around and we were watching some YouTube for a good portion of the day as we were kind of trying to craft whether or not we go on another big adventure this summer.
Oh yeah? Do you have a destination picked out yet, or are you still trying to figure that out?
Yeah, so the biggest new thought is still deep into the conversation of going to France. So
Yeah.
thinking about going there for a month is
Wow.
is the idea.
Do you have any anticipated dates of when you will be going there?
Yeah, so it is bound by really the schedules that we have enforced upon ourselves. Is right now it's Dawn's working calendar. So she has committed to a number of different weddings that she is the florist for. And so she's got those dates obviously on the calendar that have been on the calendar for months, if not years. And so she's got those dates, but there's a gap basically from beginning of June all the way through first week of August. However, I know that you and I have a trip planned right smack dab in the middle of that. So as long as that's probably where we'll cut the trip short, right around that time frame, beginning of July, and then we'll head off to the mountains.
Nice. That's kind of where I was going with my leading question there. I was curious if there was
If
any
I
chance that you were going to be getting rid of your campfire ticket.
Well, that conversation certainly came up at one point, but I think we've kind of landed that a month would be sufficient in what we're trying to do. So yeah, I imagine that you're stuck with me.
Well, no problem there. If there's any chance that you decide you don't want to take that trip to Colorado, I could maybe twist my wife's arm to join me if she wants to pick up your ticket. But I think she would rather that you go in my place or her
Yeah,
place.
I imagine that might be the case.
We'll have to be strategic if we want to continue to keep this podcast rolling because I just learned within the last couple of days that my oldest son, Caleb, he's the one who I think I've talked about him a little bit in the past. He's been kind of doing the van life thing for the last, I guess, 6 months or so. And he's actually home right now, but he and his girlfriend are getting ready to kick off probably in February. And they're going to be traveling out west through a couple of states. And then they just landed jobs right outside of Glacier National Park for 5 months. And I think it's going to be May through whatever their season is up there, May through September. So we were just kind of kicking around, well, what if I drove to Colorado in July and then left from there and traveled north to Montana and then spent a couple of weeks up there and just kind of explored. Maybe Lori came out for a week and spent some time with me as well. And then I can just slow travel my way back from, I'm almost up in Canada at that point, and it'd probably take 4 or 5 days to drive home. And just, I might be out a month myself.
Sounds a-okay to me. One day I'll make my way out to Glacier. That's definitely on my list.
It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, we really want to get up to Banff, which is the Canada's national park that's directly north of Glacier.
This is what The Bachelor has informed me about as well. So
Really?
I do know Banff. Yes.
The Bachelor?
Oh yeah, that was like one of those, if you make it further along in the show back in the day, it was like, oh yeah, you're going to go on a helicopter ride to some remote destination across the world. And yeah, Banff was definitely one of those, more than once probably. Very picturesque.
Yeah, the things you learn, I guess. That's awesome.
That's right. Well, with our conversation of Blue Monday, how do we want to continue our conversation today?
We can talk about things that I miss and don't miss about having a full-time job.
Yeah, I am keen to hear what you miss about your full-time job, because obviously as I progress in my own career journey and hopefully coming to a conclusion of that journey in the fairly near term, I imagine it's a lot of the angst that you probably had this time a year ago or plus is just trying to understand, like, hey, is it one more year syndrome? What are all the things that I have to think about? Am I making this huge mistake of walking away from a job that pays me fairly well? And sure, it doesn't light me up every single moment of every day, but there are worse things in this world, right?
Yeah, there are. I like continuing to work. Yeah, so I just crossed 9 months, and kind of, I guess, depending on who you ask, some people might say, wow, it's been 9 months already. If you were asking me, I would say it's only been 9 months, because as you and I have talked a little bit recently, I feel like time has slowed down tremendously. And I really think that is because when you have a lot more variety in your life, a lot more novelty, life just seems to go by slower. I don't know how else to describe that. I know that there's some form of like scientific evidence of that, but for me, I really felt like my work weeks back during the career were just a blur. They would go by so fast, and there was so much. They were so repetitive week after week. And I guess just to maybe touch on one of the things that I don't miss, if you'll indulge me for a little bit, I was thinking about this before we got together today, is that for the last couple of years that I was, in the full-time position, and when I was gainfully employed, I was a middle manager, and we had to report out to upper management on a weekly basis. And we would have this Thursday call that would usually last like 2 hours. And we had all these slides that had to be updated, and formatting had to be perfect. There was no exceptions. You would get called out for things that, like, something was an incorrect color, or if the font was literally, I remember having conversations about the font of my numbers were larger on one slide than they were on another. I mean, just ridiculous stuff like that. They wanted it all to flow as, I don't know, I guess as seamlessly as it possibly could. But I say all that to say we would spend the early part of the week putting together the new slide deck, and it would be just kind of a copy, but then you would have to go in and do all the editing, and we would try to automate things as much as we possibly could. But then we would have to go through and verify, you like trust but verify, and make sure that the data was accurate, and go through the painful exercise if something didn't run right. And inevitably there was always stuff like that. And then we'd have to meet to discuss, here's how things are going. What questions can we anticipate? What do we expect to these upper managers to take notice of from this data? What should we call out? What do we want to avoid? What kind of information do we want to share to try to avoid any questions? And it was just that same thing week after week after week. You would do the data collection, you would verify it, you would have all these discussions behind the scenes, and then you would go through the presenting of the information. And inevitably, almost always, it felt like there was something that they would catch that you didn't even think of. And I guess that was their job, but when you get up into the upper management levels, I can say this, I'm far enough removed now, Elliot, but they're just professional question askers is really all that their roles are at that level. And they're not generally new ideas or anything that hasn't been already done before. But then everybody scrambles to try to suffice that new idea or so-called new idea. So anyway, I'm rambling here, but that was one of the things that kind of crossed my mind as we were considering thinking about this, is just like how repetitive the weeks were. Even though I might be chasing some different problem from what it was last week on like a specific detail, or having a specific type of conversation with one of my direct reports that might be unique from week to week, the overall general framework of the week was like exactly the same week after week after week.
Felt like you were living Groundhog's Day, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly, 100% accurate. Is you think about, I'm preaching to the choir here for you, is having a long commute into work, right? Is how many times do you remember your drive into work?
Probably
next to none, right? Is unless there was a horrific accident or there was some big slowdown for some reason, you had to do some crazy weather event, It's otherwise you're just on autopilot and you're going. And I feel like that's exactly how it is at work too, is, what is it? I'm going to misquote, misstate the quote. I would say the days are long, but time is short. It is pretty much how it feels during work to a degree. Is, either it goes by so fast during a given day just because you're so busy and it's just a frenetic pace, it makes it go by really, really fast. Or you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just doing the same thing that I did last week. Like you said, I'm tweaking pixels or font size or anything else just to make some person that's forcing this task upon me to just be happy, and I can check the box and I can move about my life.
I think what you were referring to is the quote or the saying that the days are long, but the years are short. And that generally refers to child raising, because when they're little, it's just like you're like kind of, I know for me, when my kids were little, you're regretful of having this opinion as they get older, but you're like, oh, will you just, become more independent? I can't wait till they're a little bit older. You'd have those kind of thoughts, or you might even say it out loud. But then whenever they get to that stage, you're like, oh, I wish so the days are long, but the years are short. And yeah, I can see that totally relates to the job. And especially when you're in that, maybe those last 5 years, you're in the messy middle or whatever that we want to call it for within the FI movement, and you're getting closer to that early retirement date, that it just becomes a grind. And I definitely felt that in those last few years, where it felt like it was taking forever to get there. Even so, it was kind of like going back to that statement again, that days and weeks would go by really fast, but it felt like getting to that, I had a 2-year timeline when I like kind of hung my hat on a specific date, and it felt like it was taking forever to get there.
Yep. I can echo that sentiment very well. Is even though, like, to your point, is you left work, April of last year? And that was the same time that I got a new boss, I got a new role at work. So there's a lot of parallels for how long time has felt. And when I think through all the actions and things that have transpired since that time, it does feel like forever ago. But at the same time, I mean, it went through like a blink of an eye for me. And that's even with taking, a long European vacation that's having medical surgery, recovery. There are a lot of different things in there. That's like, oh yeah, that's where all that time went or whatever else. But yeah, I'm glad to hear that once my time is really my own, that in your experience, it feels like it slows down. You don't have the beat of somebody else's drum that is making it feel so much different. And really, I mean, you're in control of theoretically how fast or slow it really feels.
And I think it's probably going to vary by, person to person. It depends on what a person's schedule and their daily routines look like. If you're the type of person that likes to have a set routine and kind of go through the weeks in a similar way, I would suspect that you might not have the same type of novelty that is going to make it feel like time is going by slower. For me, I feel like my weeks look very different, and I could even, maybe not even leave the house. Lori was joking with me yesterday that she was looking. We have each other on Life 360, and she was looking at it, and she said, "You hadn't left since last Thursday. It'd been like 4 or 5 days." She's like, "You haven't left the house." And now I had gotten out and walked around the subdivision a little bit, but it's out. It's not outside of the Life 360 bubble. But I hadn't gone anywhere. It's true. I hadn't driven anywhere. I hadn't left the subdivision, but my days felt long. I had so much variety. I was working on different things around the house. I don't have to be like out and about in order to create that novelty, but I'm not in a situation where I'm doing the same type of activity day after day.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that is music to my ears. Are there any things that you really do miss from work?
The old cliche is that you miss the people, right?
Sure.
Now, I will say I worked with a lot of really, really good people. And, there's a few of them that I've stayed into contact with. And that's been really nice. There's some, though, that early on I reached out to. And, it's cordial. Oh, hey, how you doing? How's retirement life? It must be nice, that whole thing. And they would get back to me. But then after a couple of times of me reaching out, I was like, well, I'm the only, it's kind of a one way friendship here. I felt like, it's like, well, let's give it some time and see if they reach out to me. And I haven't, experienced that. Even over the holiday period, I thought maybe I would have some folks reach out to me and check in, and I didn't. Maybe that says something more about me than it does them, but I would say there's, just a handful, just really 3 people that I have stayed in contact with. And that's been nice, but I would imagine that everybody's going to be a little different. There's people that are probably going to have these friend groups. I know that there are retiree groups from my employer that get together on like a monthly basis, or maybe it's a quarterly basis. They all go out to lunch or dinner. I've never been invited, but I also am about 25 to 30 years younger than most of them. So maybe they take exception to that. I don't know. I'm just speculating. I thought that, it's kind of funny that you spend so much time with people and you talk to them almost on like a daily basis, and then you leave and you never talk to them again. But I guess that's not really unique to anything else in life. Like school was probably the same way. When you left high school, you probably saw the same people almost every day you left, and you didn't talk to the majority of them. And same with college and, other things. If you were to move from St. Louis, Elliot, to Europe, you might have just a handful of people you talk to. I don't know.
It's true. Yeah, it's funny that you bring up like the concept of friends and just your bubbles. And I think that's really what we're getting at, right? Is how much, people will say that your identity is so wrapped up in work, right? And I think part of that is really just so much, like, of course, there is, some people whose identity truly is wrapped up in work. But then there's the other part, and I would say that I fall into this category is, just like you. I like associating with the people. It's very cliche, but, I like to do good work and have that be known. But otherwise, like, I want to be a good coworker, a good friend to the people that I'm around. Like, I just want to be a pleasant person. I'll give an example. Before I worked at my current company, I worked for a company for 10 years. So obviously build a lot of relationships over that span of time. I was actually at a visitation for a friend's uncle that had passed away this past weekend. And so I had gone to the funeral or gone to the visitation, and I happened to run into an old coworker, and I was like, whoa, like two worlds collide. It just happened that he went to the same church and so knew the person that had passed. But this is somebody that back in my working time with this individual, like, I would have considered him a friend, and like, we certainly have gone out, had drinks before, would talk about sports, just somebody that I would maintain a positive relationship with. And of course, on the outset of passing each other and talking for a few minutes, it was like, oh, we should catch up, have dinner, go out for drinks or something. And it's like, yeah, tuck that in the back of my mind that it hasn't happened in 3.5+ years since I've left that company. What's the reality that that's really going to happen unless, like, I take it upon myself to try and force the issue. Like you said, is it truly just a one-way friendship? I've had other people in my life that I feel like I've had to be that person for a lot of time. And I will say that people in my own life have challenged me not to just be that person. Like, there is, I don't know if it's stress or what you would call it, but there's some sort of weight put on you as being that person that's always trying to maintain that relationship. And so, like, if people aren't reciprocating, then let it go, right? And I've tried to do that in my new life. In my life these days, is if people aren't reciprocating the relationship, there's tons of other people in this world. Don't waste your time and your effort.
It's a whole new you, Elliot. That's okay. We can call 2026 the year of the new Elliot.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I think, I agree with all that. And I think that it's important for people to make sure that they understand kind of going into if they are pursuing early retirement. And we probably talked about it before when we've talked about community, but for me, it's not important. I never had my identity with work. There's like zero that I miss about the company, about the role and responsibilities, about the products that they manufacture, any of those things. There's nothing that I miss about any of that. At times I do think of certain individuals and I'm like, oh, I wonder how they're doing, and I find myself like, well, should I reach out to them? And I probably could, there's definitely no harm in that. And I'm sure they would be friendly. But then it's, I don't know. It's going to be something similar like you just described, where it's like, oh yeah, we should get together. Let's go grab lunch or dinner or whatever. And then it'll just turn into a future casting or whatever that it's going to be this way. And there's probably, no proof of this, but or it's going to be a back and forth kind of thing. And then it's just like, oh God, why did I bother? Like, well, I can't do this Friday. How about next Friday? Well, I can't. And then, well, let's get back to, let's check in a couple weeks and see how things are going, and then it just turns into a little bit more of a hassle than it maybe could have been. And like you said, I find that it's probably a little bit more, one-sided, where it's like, I don't want to constantly be that person that's always reaching out and it's not coming the other way.
That's what happens when you ask somebody to change the brakes on your car and they refuse. They're cut out from your life. Yeah.
Oh man.
All jokes aside, no,
that hurts.
No, I foresee myself being exactly the same way. I have no strong attachment to. I don't think that I have any identity wrapped up in my work. I have no idea that really any of my work product, probably in my entire career, has any chance of making any lasting impact, nor do I desire it to. It is what it is, and there is nothing that I think that I'm going to materially miss beyond maybe, a person here or there, right? And that's on you if you want to maintain that relationship outside of the confines of those four walls. It doesn't surprise me at this point to hear you say that there's really no cons that you're seeing of leaving the job, or any regrets from leaving.
I guess maybe having had a moment or two to think about it. The other things, and this is just my own probably insecurity, but the only other two things that I would say that I miss is the steady paycheck, and that's just from a peace of mind standpoint. I never had a concern or a fear that I was going to lose my job, or it was a very stable industry. We never had any kind of layoffs or anything like that. So it was easy. It was easy money. I knew the role well enough. There was, no uncertainty, I guess, or very little. And, with going into early retirement, there is a lot more uncertainty because just as we talked through our expenses, we weren't doing a great job of really tracking that and understanding. So in the back of my mind, I was actually a little bit concerned and fearful that we were outspending, even though Lori's still working and we know that, but at some point she's not going to be working, or she's going to be working less. So in the back of my mind, it was always, are we outspending the pace at which our investments can provide for us and or any additional income? And I think I've solved that for the most part. And I know better now, having gone through the expenses exercise, and I want to continue that going forward. But, that was one thing that I would say, that just showed up in my bank account every other week. And now it'll be a little bit more on me to create that monthly paycheck once we are in a situation where we need it. And that can potentially get a little bit scary, I would imagine, as people that are further along than me would, be able to describe how it feels to be withdrawing money in a market turndown or downturn. And, so the other thing would be the health insurance. So we had to switch from my plan that I think was very cheap and not as cheap as yours, but it had it just had a lot of flexibility, and I had my choice of providers, and we had to switch to Lori's, which was quite a bit more expensive and a lot less flexible, and just all around not as good of a plan as what I had. So, those are two very tiny things, but if I really had to dig deeper and figure out what I miss, it would be, that steady paycheck and the good health insurance.
Yeah. I mean, no surprise is the risk of, just scarcity mindset of not having that steady paycheck. 100%. That's what's in the back of my head. If I didn't have that, my notice would already be there. So, and along with that, I mean, of course, in my eyes, it's still pretty much a crime that we haven't figured out healthcare in this country, as opposed to so many other developed nations really have, and how we really tie people so much to a job just born out of healthcare. Now, I know you can go to the ACA, and we know plenty of people that go through that route, especially in the FI community, but it's certainly not the norm, and it's more nuanced. So you opened up the door for me to ask, Josh, have you made any progress on finding your primary care physician?
As the words were coming out of my mouth about health insurance, I knew that you were going to turn it around on me. I felt it. I was like, oh, I wish I could take this back, because no, to answer your question, I have not done any of the tasks that I said I was going to do. And now we're sitting here recording on January 20th. It's on my list for this week. Lori actually, so the couple of things that I want to do is to get a physical and do some blood work, just to like an annual checkup. I say annual, but it's more like I have not done this in probably close to
10
10
years.
years.
Yeah.
And I know I'm at the age where I probably should be looking at getting a colonoscopy. Has given me that information. She looked it up for some reason yesterday. And then the dentist is the other one. So I actually do I think I probably said that I don't have a primary care physician, but there is a nurse practitioner at the nearby, I don't know what you call it, medical building that I have seen in the past. So I just need to make an appointment with her and then get the ball rolling on the other things that she can just point me in the right direction. And then I need to get moving on the colonoscopy, no pun intended.
Does that nurse practitioner take your new healthcare?
Lori believes that she does, so I need to confirm that, but I'm pretty sure. If she does not, then I'm back to square one and I might need a little more time.
Fair, fair. Well, I figure it's only fair if I turned it on you. I should probably turn it on myself. I also have failed miserably in my working out. So yeah, since the beginning of the year, I really have not been super diligent about at least like what I was doing in physical therapy. And my foot has certainly not felt, I mean, spectacular. Now, I think how much of that is just my foot right now. And I mean, I'm getting a lot more activity, which is just generally a good thing for it, but it's also going to feel worse in the short term. But I should still be amping things up more than I am. So we're brothers in failure.
My question back to you that I want to ask that's very unfair is what do we need to do to change that? But you can certainly throw that my way first because I don't think it's right for me to
Man.
toss that in your direction.
I don't know is the short answer. I think I need to remove the barrier of I'm certainly not going to lay this at my wife's feet because there is stuff sitting on the all my workout equipment in the garage right now, but that is not her fault. She knows if it's a priority to me, I'll move it. So, but I think the true onus is figuring out the right time when I'm going to do it, and the fact that it's in the garage. I haven't winterized my garage at all, so it's cold. It's cold here in the winter. It was like, 13 degrees, and so motivating myself like you, like if I was going to go in the morning, I have had this run lately of waking up very early in the morning. So like this morning I woke up at 5 o'clock, down an alarm. I mean, I don't have to be at work at any specific time, but historically I would get there at 7. It's harder to work out, I would say, later in the day, just with kids and everything else. Like if I leave it to the end of the day, it just probably ain't gonna happen. So I imagine it's gonna have to be the first thing that I do in the morning, and so I guess winterizing the garage theoretically, or just toughen it up, put on layers, do whatever you got to do, is part of it. Or I just need to suck it up, pay the $10 to go get a Planet Fitness membership, and just do a routine there, or work out at work too. They have a gym there, so.
Oh, wow. There's options there. I was going to throw out one thing, and this is just because of what we use. I don't use it so much anymore, but Lori still uses we have a membership, or I guess that's the right word for it, to the Beachbody or the Body app or whatever. And it has a tremendous amount of programs on there that you can do for a variety of time. And Lori's actually in the process of doing this 10-minute like add-on routine. And they have tons of different coaches and things like that. But I think they're running a special right now where you can get a 1-year membership for less than $100 and you get access to all of it. And then you can, like, if you wanted to just maybe even get a couple of dumbbells, you could do some body weight stuff and then use some dumbbells for some other resistance stuff. So I say all that to say maybe like your home office there, you could just have a couple of 25-pound dumbbells and some resistance bands, and it could bridge the gap between now and springtime when, kind of get you going a little bit until the weather warms up and you can get back into your regular gym garage.
Was gonna say I just have lots of excuses. I mean, I rolled into work at 6:20 this morning. I could have gone down to the gym and just as easily worked out there. So yeah, stop making excuses. I think that's the short answer.
Yeah. Do you have any specific fitness goals for this year that you've kind of mapped out, like weight
Nope.
wise or
Nope.
anything like that?
That
No.
that's
Okay.
certainly. I mean, what I would always say is no. Is the most succinct answer is just to be in better health and lose body fat. The things that everybody says. Well, yeah, you got to give it some specificity, or you're always going to want to try and do those things. That doesn't really help you set a goalpost. That's not a smart goal, Josh. So yeah, I mean, I think I just don't generally care beyond just getting healthier. Losing weight would be a good thing. Losing body fat would be a good thing. I have elevated blood pressure, so just any of those things would probably be good to resolve.
One negative side effect that I've experienced since I've left work, and something that I'm trying to work on right now is, and I know that everybody's going to be like cursing me for this, but I have continued to lose weight and I'm not intending to. And I think it's a combination of, but it's why I also need to make sure I get a physical, but it's a combination of being active and then not really having a strong appetite throughout the day. And sometimes I will forget to eat lunch and I got to remind myself, like, oh my gosh, it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I haven't eaten anything since breakfast. And there were times when I would just go, oh, I'll just grab a whatever, granola bar or some kind of a snack. And then that would hold me over until dinner. But that's only like 150, 200 calories. Whereas when I was working, I was always taking that lunch break. Like I couldn't wait to get to lunch. And I always, it was very at the forefront of my daily routine. So I know that my calorie intake was a lot higher and my activity level was a lot lower. Now it's the opposite. So now I'm just constantly doing things and burning more and I'm not eating as much. So that's something that I've had to like focus on, and much to, like pretty much everybody's like, we all have our problems,
Yeah,
right?
must be nice, Josh.
we we all have our problems, and that's one that's just we've talked about it. I'm not much of a foodie. I don't like get a tremendous amount of satisfaction from eating, from just eating in general. I love breakfast, and that's about where it ends with me. I could probably go the rest of the day today without eating. It's 5 o'clock in the evening, and I had a beef stick before we started recording here, and that could probably hold me over for the rest of the day. But I know that I need to eat because I have stepped on the scale and I'm like, what the heck, man? It's just, this is not good. And especially if you're, so I do exercise every day. I do a lot of stretching. Every day I will do at least 10 minutes or so of stretching, usually more. And then I usually have about 4 to 5 days of weightlifting. And I'm constantly trying to gain muscle, which is very hard to do as you get older. And I know that I'm not hitting my protein levels and I'm probably not getting an adequate amount of calorie intake to support those goals. So it's like I'm constantly fighting myself. I'm like hitting it hard in the gym and feeling really good about the pump, but then I don't have anything to, I'm not feeding myself well
Yeah,
enough to
don't
grow
get the
those muscles.
gains. Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, the whole half your body weight in protein is certainly a tough metric to hit, and I think in what a lot of people claim that that's how much you need to.
They actually say 1 gram per pound of body weight.
One
So
gram per pound. Man,
yeah.
It's a lot.
It's really hard.
Yeah, you got to be like Brad and be putting down those protein yogurts and
Yeah.
like 3 of those a day and everything else.
And I have tried some of that. I do have a protein shake in the morning with my breakfast, and then I will have some of those Greek yogurts, but I don't get the as high a quantity of protein as the ones that he's referenced, mainly because I don't have a Costco membership. But that's what
There's some
Aldi.
Aldi one that's pretty close to the ones that he put out there at one point in time.
Yeah, I think the ones we get are 15 grams for yogurt.
Okay.
There may be one
Yeah.
higher than that. I'm not sure, but it's hard. I'm constantly trying to find ways to just put more food into my mouth, and it's yeah. I
I've
don't
got
want
the
to.
inverse problem, so you know.
Well, and I don't want to be one of those guys that as I get older, I'm just looking like a stick. You know what I mean? Like unhealthy, and I see that in a lot of I guess you can kind of see that in some of the blue collar workers, as they get older. And my grandparents were like that. Both my grandfathers were like that. They were both very thin, and as they aged, they lost weight and got smaller. And I want to kind of try to stave that off as long as I possibly can. I remember my grandpa telling me one time that it was hard for him to eat just like a value meal from McDonald's or wherever. He would generally have to share it with my grandma or just get a sandwich and that was it. Like he couldn't eat a whole meal. And I always thought that was so strange because back in my 20s, I was getting like at McDonald's, I was getting the 2 cheeseburger meal and a chicken sandwich for dessert.
Yeah. No, I could definitely go to the value meal and consume 3 sandwiches like no problem. And a fry and yeah. No. No problem. But yeah, so those are certainly things that I know that I need to work on and prioritize and make it more than just talk.
Let's do it.
That's right.
Just do it.
This has been a fun and kind of a grab bag of topics here, but if you stayed with us for this long, thanks as always. If you liked what you heard today, please like, subscribe, give us a thumbs up on whether you're watching us on YouTube or the podcast player of your choice. We really appreciate it. If you drop us a note, we certainly read them, provide any comments, good or bad. We just love to hear the feedback, as
That's right.
always. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Elliot. See you later.
See you, Josh.